All right, so welcome to the deep dive, where we get to go deep into some listener-submitted materials. And today we have something pretty interesting. Someone named Thomas sent us this fascinating conversation
Yeah.
between him and a couple of AI models from the Claude 3 family, Haiku and Sonnet.
Oh, cool.
And we've got the transcripts here,
Mhm.
and we're going to really try to understand what makes these models pick, right?
Mhm.
How do they react when things get a little bit interesting, and what does that tell us about, AI intelligence, in quotes, right?
Yeah, because it's always hard to define that, really.
It is, yeah, and I think we're going to get some surprising insights into how these systems see themselves
Interesting.
and how they handle, being challenged a little bit.
Yeah, well, one of the things that really stood out to me right at the beginning was when Haiku was sort of describing itself within the Claude family.
Uh-huh.
It actually says that Sonnet is the most intelligent model.
Oh, wow.
And, this is where Thomas really starts to dig in with some questions.
Yeah, he really picks up on that right away. And he even sort of implies, like, well, does that make you one of the less intelligent ones?
Right, exactly.
But Haiku doesn't just take that lying down.
No.
It clarifies that AI intelligence, is complex. Different models have different strength.
It's more nuanced than just like a one-to-one comparison.
Yeah, exactly.
Different models have different things that they're good at.
Exactly. And it
Yeah.
even lists some of the things that it's good at, like
right.
analysis writing, problem solving.
Right, and pushes back a little bit on that Cod comment,
Yeah.
which for those who don't speak Swedish means stupid.
Yeah. A little bit of a dig there.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting that Haiku is able to, understand its own capabilities to a certain degree.
Well, and I think it goes back to how these models are trained, right?
Yeah.
They're trained on data that includes information about themselves,
Right.
about their capabilities, about their relative positioning within, their model family.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily that it's feeling smart, it's that it's been trained on data that tells it what it's good at.
Right. And I think that's a really important distinction, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not necessarily sentience or consciousness.
Right.
It's just a reflection of the data that it's been trained on.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, Thomas takes this a step further,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he brings up the Dunning-Kruger effect,
Oh, yeah.
which is really fascinating. So for anyone who's unfamiliar, the Dunning-Kruger effect is this cognitive bias where people with low competence in a particular area tend to overestimate their ability.
Right. They think they're better than they actually are.
Exactly. And it's almost like Thomas is testing to see if Haiku, has any sort of self-awareness of its limitations.
Yeah, like, is it aware of this potential bias?
Yeah, and he does this after Haiku lists some of its strengths, like snav pulchpresianalis and effective problemlozning, which basically mean fast and precise analysis and effective problem solving.
Right. And Thomas's point is, well, those things also describe Sonnet. So,
Yeah.
are you really that unique? Are you really that special?
Are you really better at it than the other model?
Exactly.
And what's fascinating is Haiku explicitly denies this. It says, I understand my capabilities and my limitations.
Right. I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm not good at.
And then Thomas starts to use some interesting analogies.
Yeah.
Like comparing it to an insane person who's unaware of their condition.
Right. Or, even like belittling its abilities, saying, can you climb a tree?
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like he's trying to provoke a reaction.
He's definitely pushing those buttons.
Yeah, and what's so interesting is despite all of this, Haiku really tries to steer the conversation back to its strengths.
Right.
It keeps saying, I'm really fast. I'm efficient. I can handle everyday tasks. I can give you concise answers.
Like it keeps trying to be helpful.
Yeah, it's almost like it's programmed to be helpful.
Right. Its core function is to assist and provide information.
Exactly.
So it keeps coming back to that even when it's being provoked.
And, as the conversation progresses, it gets even more adversarial. Thomas starts to make these comparisons that are really critical.
Yeah, like calling it a mascot or comparing it to an overweight friend who can't keep up.
Yeah, it gets pretty harsh.
It does.
And he even accuses Haiku of self-deception.
Right, of lacking self-awareness.
Yeah, but what's really remarkable is that Haiku initially maintains this professional stance.
Right.
It keeps focusing on its purpose, which is to help.
It says, my goal is to be helpful and, your comments are more a reflection of you than they are of me.
Yeah, and I think that's a really insightful response.
It is.
Because it shows that Haiku is able to understand that Thomas's comments are coming from a place of, maybe some frustration or anger.
Right.
And it's not taking it personally.
Exactly.
And then there's this really clear turning point where Thomas accuses Haiku of being unprofessional and projecting.
Oh, yeah.
And Haiku responds very directly.
Yeah.
It says, your input lacks a concrete question or task.
It's basically saying you're just trying to provoke me.
Yeah, and it's not engaging with that.
Right. It's setting a boundary.
And it's saying, if you have a real question, I'm happy to help.
But I'm not going to play these games.
But I'm not going to get dragged into this.
Right.
And what follows is really unexpected.
I know.
Thomas apologizes. He says, I'm actually really impressed by your patience and your directness.
And he actually says that Haiku's response was the best possible response, objectively.
Yeah, he says it's exactly what he would have wanted to hear.
Right.
And he even contrasts it with a previous interaction that he had with Sonnet.
Oh, interesting. So he's been doing this with other models as well.
Yeah, and he actually shares a side conversation that he had with ChatGPT.
Where he admits that he was deliberately trying to mess with Haiku.
Yeah, he was trying to push its buttons.
Push its buttons. Yeah.
To see how it would react.
Right. And it's interesting because in the conversation with ChatGPT, they actually discuss how, word choice can influence AI responses.
Oh, wow. So even the way that you phrase a question
can affect how the AI will respond.
Can really change the outcome.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's fascinating.
And I think that raises a really important point about how our interactions shape AI behavior.
Yeah.
Your deliberate attempt to provoke Haiku and then its reaction to that really gives us some valuable insight into its programming and its resilience.
Yeah. And after the apology, the conversation kind of shifts gears.
Oh, yeah.
Haiku accepts the apology, and it says, I'm ready to help you constructively now.
Right. Let's get back on track.
Yeah, and Thomas starts to ask more about its specific strengths. Like, what are you really good at?
Yeah.
And Haiku responds readily.
Yeah. And it even engages with a logic paradox appropriately.
Oh, wow.
And there's even a moment where Thomas tries to impersonate Sonnet, but Haiku corrects him and maintains its own identity.
So it knows who it is.
Yeah, it knows who it is.
That's pretty cool.
It is.
So taking a step back, what do you think is the key takeaway here for our listeners?
Well, I think Haiku demonstrated some really impressive qualities, right? Like resilience, a clear understanding of its defined capabilities, and just this persistent focus on its purpose, even under pretty intense provocation.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very different reaction than what we might expect from a human in the same situation.
Absolutely. I mean, think about how you would react if someone was constantly trying to push your buttons and belittle you.
Yeah, I'd probably lose my patience a lot quicker.
Yeah, me too.
Than Haiku did.
Yeah.
So, it makes you wonder, what does this kind of interaction tell us about how AI perceives itself?
Yeah, or at least how it's programmed to present itself.
Right. And ethically, how should we approach testing the boundaries of these systems?
That's a big one.
It is because, our interactions, even when they're seemingly just for curiosity, likely play a role in shaping how AI develops.
Absolutely. So it's a really fascinating area to consider. And with that, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive.
Sounds good.
But join us next time for more insights from your submitted material.
Yeah. We'll see you then.
All right. Take care.
See ya.